Hey, you're watching Nightmares and Scares. That gets me every time. It's a little creepy. Um, Welcome to the show, everybody. My name is Matt, and with me, as always, is
Dan.
Hey, Dan. How are you, sir?
Doing well, Matt. How are you doing, sir?
Doing all right. I'm excited about what we're here to talk about today because we're here to talk about well, I'm just going to say it, a classic in the horror genre. We're talking about 28 Days Later. Um, this movie, I don't know. This has been a big movie in my life for a couple reasons we'll get into. Um, but just kicking off the bat, I mean, Dan, you had seen this before, so but upon revisit, what is your initial overview?
I think 28 Days Later definitely sets itself apart from other horror movies. I know at the end of the last episode that we were on, you did state this was a zombie movie. This is not a zombie movie. This is an infected movie.
Mm,
So I just
yeah,
want to clarify that going off. But definitely some strong acting. Really enjoy this film. And we'll get into it, I guess, more specific in the reviews. But overall, I know, again, you said this was played kind of a central role in your horror movie voyeur days. So what can you tell us about that?
sure. So before I get into the synopsis, I just want to say, as a lot of people know who are on here, or if they don't know, they've kind of picked up, or if this is your first time joining us, welcome. But I am a wannabe filmmaker. I'm soon going to stop calling myself a wannabe. The current project I'm working on, I'm no longer going to call myself a wannabe once that's finished. Just FYI. But back in the day, I would make movies with my friends and family, and this specific movie was one of a few things, but one of the big inspirations for me to make my own zombie movie back in 2011, called. Can you guess what it was called? The Infected. Um, and I mean, it's terrible quality. It was something that I thought about maybe we could watch and talk about on here. It would be fun, but the quality is just so poor. It doesn't hold up at all. I do have a DVD disc version, which I think is slightly better, but the quality that's online is just terrible. But here's a cool little bad quality screen grab of Dan and myself, me with a gun of all things to his head. Um, from that movie again, poor quality, but that's the quality that you're going to get if you watch it online. um, but it was a fun time, and there was a time, especially in that 2010 through 2012, 14 era, where zombies were a huge deal. You had video games, you had The Walking Dead, which came very around that time. Of course, just like my movie came before The Walking Dead, 28 Days Later came way before The Walking Dead. See how I brought it back around there? Um, and we're going to talk about that today. So, this was directed by Danny Boyle, and the synopsis, really quick here, is 28 days after a killer virus is accidentally unleashed from a Britain research facility, a small group of London survivors are caught in a desperate struggle to protect themselves from the infected. Carried by animals and humans, the virus turns those it infects into homicidal maniacs. Dan's right, it does not say zombies, and it's absolutely impossible to contain it. The film stars this little known actor. He never went on to work again. Was it Killian Murphy? Um, never seen this guy before. He did little things like the Chris Nolan Batman Dark Knight trilogy, Inception, Dunkirk, Quiet Place 2. Oh
So
yeah,
central
and
character in Peaky Blinders.
Peaky Blinders. Oh yeah, also the massive award-winning Oppenheimer last year. Um, we also got Naomi Harris, who I just love in this movie. I love her as a person and as an actress. She is, after this went on to do the Daniel Craig James Bond films. She also did Miami Vice, Southpaw, Moonlight, couple of the Pirates of the Caribbean films. She's had a pretty successful career since 28 Days Later. Um, then we've got Brendan Gleeson, who is most notably for Paddington 2 and Edge of Tomorrow and a few of the Harry Potter films. He was Mad Eye Moody in those films. And then, of course, we've got Megan Burns, who played Hannah. Not much is known about Megan. She went on to pursue a music career in the early 2000s and then has kind of faded away. She lives a private life now. So that is our cast. And that is our story. Uh, Before we're going to change up the order a little bit. Before I get into the recap here, we're going to actually do the real reviews that we normally do at the end of the show first. So we're going to give the audience their own reviews back to them. If you haven't watched this before, what we typically do is we pull two reviews, one 5-star review and one 1-star review. These are real reviews from you, the interwebs, and we are going to read them out here on the show. So, Dan, I had the privilege of doing the 1-star last time. I'm going to give you the privilege of doing the 1-star this time.
Guys, we're going into this completely blind. Haven't seen the review yet, so excited to do that for you whenever I find the review.
It's in your private chat.
It is not there.
What do you mean? It is there. I'm looking at it.
Post it again.
Let me send it again. How about
There
now?
we go. There we go. Got it. All right, guys. So our 1-star review comes from Rosa D. It was boring and predictable.
Ouch.
Also, it was just a little weird, and I was not a fan of it at all. Literally the worst of the zombie movies ever made, overhyped. And that's, you gave it a 1-star because, again, you watch this as a zombie movie. This is not a zombie movie. You got to get that straight, guys. You're never gonna like this as a zombie movie. It's an infected movie.
You might be onto something there. So I've got the 5-star review. This is from Ryan Fitzgerald. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Rosa D, as well. 28 Days Later is a movie that, in a post-COVID world, feels almost like looking into a mirror of that era. Alex Garland perfectly describes the paranoia and desperation of a post-apocalyptic world with such little dialogue and such barren emptiness. I think that sums it up.
Profound. Show's over. Wrap it up.
Yeah, credits. Thanks for joining us, everybody. So now we're going to get into the part of the show where we recap. We're going to go over what happened in the movie. So if you have not seen this movie, warning ahead of time, full spoilers. Of course, we did our first episode of Nightmares and Scares with The Omen. That took me an hour to get through that recap. Dan showed me up with Cabin in the Woods, and we were able to get through that whole entire episode in 30 minutes. So I'm going to try to make this a lot quicker this time. Fingers crossed. So here we go. The film opens in a lab, a research lab. We see some monkeys there, and they're getting experimented on. This group of people come in and they're taking pictures and they're seemingly trying to rescue these monkeys. They find a doctor who's in the lab, or a research scientist. I'm not sure exactly what his title is, but he's in a white coat. And he tells them that the animals are infected with rage and to not let them out. But like any good horror film, the people don't listen and they let them out anyway. The monkey escapes and attacks one of the girls in the group, which of course then makes her infected, and we have the domino effect of an outbreak. And then we get our title, which is also our timeline, 28 days later. We see naked Cillian Murphy, penis and all, waking up on a hospital bed. There's nobody around anywhere. The hospital looks to be abandoned. He goes outside. He does get dressed. He goes outside. He sees it's not just the hospital, but the streets are also empty. There's garbage in the streets. Vehicles are turned over. It's truly a post-apocalyptic type vibe. He makes his way into a church, and there are what appears to be a bunch of people lying on the ground, maybe dead, maybe not. He says hello, and this infected priest starts charging at him, and it's kind of terrifying. I don't know about you, but I remember the first time I ever watched this movie, that priest scene kind of got me. Like, I was like, oh, easy now, father. um, so he hits the priest, and in a comical moment, he says, "Oh, I shouldn't have done that." And of course, we now see that the people that were on the ground in the church weren't dead, or at least not in the sense that we thought. They're all infected and start to chase him. Um, he runs out of the church and is rescued by these people in masks with like these flame bomb thrower things. Um, the and they get Jim, I guess I should say our character's name is Jim. That's who Cillian Murphy is playing. Um, they get Jim to a shelter and unmask themselves, and we meet Selena and Mark. They have kind of come together to help each other survive, and they tell Jim the story of how the virus slash infection took over the world and essentially destroyed it. There is no government anymore, no TV, no radio, no police, no army, no electricity. uh, Most everyone in the world is dead. I got a gnat flying in my face. Um, so, Jim, of course, is in denial about this. There's always a government. What do you mean there's no government? Um, but you're muted.
So I think that's more Scottish than it is an
Yeah,
Irish or English
I'm not
accent.
yeah, I can't do what he was doing, but there's always a government. um, but end up taking Jim to his home. He lived nearby, and so he needs to see if his family is alive, his mom and dad. And it's kind of this heartbreaking scene where he goes in and finds his mother and father in bed together, deceased. It appears as if they've killed themselves, taking pills. Um, Again, just very, very tragic, very heartbreaking. And they believe Jim has died as well. They wrote like a suicide note type of
Yeah,
thing that's kind
it
of address.
was it we left you sleeping, please don't wake up, and then had
Yeah,
like, the
yeah,
baby
they were
photo.
coming to sleep. They were coming to sleep with him or something. Um, but they're in the house, and later on, Jim, Mark, and Selena get attacked. The infected come through a window and attack Jim, and Selena and Mark both try to save him. But afterwards, Selena is questioning Jim. Were you bitten? Have you been bitten? And we see that Mark has been bitten. And without hesitation, she goes to work on Mark, just butchering him, killing him right in front of Jim. Um, and so they leave, and she tells Jim that if someone gets bitten, they must be killed instantly before they turn. And tells him that if it were to happen to Jim, she would kill him in a heartbeat. Um, Something to remember there. They run into some more infected. The music in this specific scene, the whole movie, but is super tense and brilliant. Um, and they end up getting saved by Frank and his daughter Hannah. Um, and they kind of take Jim and Selena in for the night. And Selena's worried about Frank and Hannah slowing them down, but Jim thinks they're good people who need help. And Jim lets her know that he gets it, and um, knows that he would be dead if not for her. Um, and the next day, they're all there. They hear a radio signal of what sounds like soldiers saying there's a safe space and the answer to infection is at their location. Frank wants to go and knows that he needs Jim and Selena to help him and Hannah get there. And after some back and forth about whether or not they should, they begin their travels in this little taxi cab type thing. Um, they go into a tunnel, um, and have to drive over this pile of, I don't know if it was like garbage or these other things. um, but it's kind of this fun, whoa, this big hill. They go over, they come down, and of course, they get a flat tire. Um, and they attempt to change the tire, but of course, the infected show up and they have to do some like NASCAR style tire changing. It's quite impressive. They get away just in the nick of time. Um, and then there's this cute, fun little scene where they stop at a grocery store and basically go through and get everything they and anything that they want. Frank even leaves his debit or credit card at the register. He's not going to need it anymore in the world that they're in. Um, and they stop when they come across an like this oil tanker or gas tanker of sorts. And they try to siphon some gas. And while Frank is getting the fuel, Jim makes his wanders. Like he just kind of wanders around, exploring. Um, he goes into this nearby abandoned restaurant, and a young child shows up, an infected child, and tries to attack Jim, but Jim quickly kills him. Um, and when he comes out, of course, he doesn't mention this to Selena or anybody else. Um, it was kind of like at first, and I had forgotten about that scene, and it was kind of like, what was the point of that? Like, why did we need that scene? But then it does get called back later. You know, when the major says, who have you killed? You had to kill somebody in order to still to be here. Um, so they travel some more and stop again for a rest, and they have this picnic type of thing, and they're eating food, and they see beautiful horses running and roaming, and Jim and Selena take a walk together and sort of bond. She realizes she was wrong about her outlook on the whole situation and gives him a quick little peck on the cheek. Um, there's sort of the beginnings of a relationship growing there. They're starting to kind of respect each other and care for one another. Um, and they sleep there for the night. Jim has a bad dream, but they get back up on the road the next morning and they arrive to the campsite where the radio signal had given them, and there's no one there. It looks deserted. They walk around and check, and Frank refuses to accept that it's a lost cause. Um, he continues to search even when everyone else is ready to go. And then there we see a bird on a roof nearby, and there's a dead body up there. Um, and Frank sees the bird. Yes, Frank sees the bird. Exactly. What Dan is acting out is exactly what happens. And of course, he kicks the building or something to make a noise to kind of shoo the bird away from the body. But in doing so, a drop of infected blood comes down and falls into Frank's eye. And then we get this extremely emotional type of scene where Frank is apologizing to Hannah and making her stay away from him. He's yelling, "Stay away, stay away." And Selena realizes that he's now infected and orders Jim to kill him. Jim's conflicted, but before he even can make a decision on what to do, Frank is literally gunned down by the soldiers from the radio broadcast. They show up. They take Jim, Hannah, and Selena to this nearby building where we meet Major Henry West, who tells them they've got beds and clean sheets and hot water so they can take a shower. Um, Selena has kind of like a small little breakdown in the room because she has bonded with Hannah and doesn't want her to have to cope with the fact that her father is dead. And Jim kisses her and they make out for a moment before she stops and just leaves the room. It was kind of sudden, but I think they're also trying to push this relationship with the remaining time that we have in the film. Um, so then Major West gives Jim a tour of the house. He shows the precautions taken to not let the infected in and introduces him to one of the fellow soldiers who has also been infected, um, who is Private Mailer. They have him chained outside. They want to study him so they can learn. Most notably, they want to know how long it will take uh, for the infected to starve to death. Um, Later on, Major West reveals to Jim that he promised. Well, so I guess I should back up just a hair. There is a scene where some of the soldiers try to, um, I don't know what the right wording here is, but try to get frisky with,
They try to force themselves on.
yeah, force themselves on Selena. Um, and Jim, of course, stops it, and Major West comes in and handles the situation. And this is when West reveals to Jim that he had promised his soldiers women. And Jim kind of realizes here that they've been set up and that this whole thing was kind of more or less to find women for the 9 men and to recreate the population. Um, and Jim quickly tries to get Selena and Hannah out, but is stopped.
I just want to take like a beat for 1 second and
Sure.
just point out, how do we remember how much of the timeline has passed up to this point? Was it about 28 days past the initial outbreak?
How what did you say? How many?
Was it around 28 days from the initial
Yeah,
outbreak?
so from the initial outbreak with the monkeys, this is like 28 days from
So
then.
I find it funny that they like devolve in literally like less than a month's worth of time. But I'm gonna give it
Yeah,
that.
I was thinking about that too when as I was watching this last night. Like I was like, really? We're in a month? Like we've got men who are starving for woman of affection, and we're it's kind of like, huh. But it's a movie. Um, so they stop Jim and Selena and Hannah from going out, and Wes says he can't let them go. Two of the soldiers take Jim out to the woods to execute him. And they take him to a spot where there are tons of dead bodies on the ground. And one of the soldiers accidentally almost shoots the other, um, which allows Jim time to hide. And he hides mixed within the bodies, and they think he's ran off elsewhere. And he's able to escape as they go looking for him. Um, and he makes it appear as if he's jumped over this barbed wire wall, but actually he's making his way back to the building to save Selena and Hannah. And um, meanwhile, the soldiers are forcing Hannah and Selena to get changed into something nice. Selena gives Hannah medication so that she's going to be kind of out of it and not really feel anything. She's just going to, like the words in the movie were, not care. Um, And suddenly a siren goes off and everyone is on alert and they know that it's Jim. Um, and Jim is now kind of like in battle mode, right? He's turned into badass Jim. Um, and he kills some soldiers as he makes his way back to the house. And most importantly, he unchains Mailer, the infected zombie person that was, outside of their building. He shoots the chain and frees him. So now Mailer is able to go into the house. Um, and which Mailer attacks the soldiers and starts killing them one by one, while Jim is also killing them as he comes across them. And there's this beautifully tense scene with uh, within the house, which and the song that's playing by, oh gosh, John Murphy, is called "In a House in a Heartbeat," and it's the 28 Days Later theme. And it's just starting to gear up and starting to play as the scene is happening, and it's just this tense scene because of the music. And the soldiers that have now been bitten are also turning infected themselves. And we see one of the soldiers take Selena into another room, and Jim witnesses this, and he's kind of like crawling up on the rafters, like of the loft of the build of the rooms. He's able to look down upon them, um, and he leaps down on the guard and starts bashing his head into the wall, and then gouges his eyes. All the while, Selena watches this and is, scared herself. She's not sure what she's witnessing. She starts to go for the machete because she's not sure if Jim is infected himself. Um, and it's just this beautiful moment, um, where he turns to look at her, and they stand there for a moment, while the music is full force blasting. Um, and she finally goes to swing, but as she does, she sees in his eyes that he isn't infected. And he jokes that that was way longer than a heartbeat. Boom. Um, they kiss and make out right there. Um, he's all bloody and, they're wet because it's raining and it's kind of gross, but there they are making out. Um, and here comes Hannah, who's drugged out of her mind and breaks this glass over Jim's head because she thinks that he's biting Selena. I thought he was biting you. um, so they run away, but when they go to get into a car, they see Major West, sitting in the car, and he shoots Jim point blank. Um, and Hannah hops in the car that he's in and drives West right up to where Mailer is, and Mailer just grabs him. That's not it. Mailer grabs him uh, out of the car and starts to essentially eat him and kill him, um, and then drives back and gets uh, Jim and Selena, um, and uh, they go to leave the fort. And when they get to the gate, it's all chained. There's no like easy way out, so they floor it. And when they do, the scene kind of stops right as everyone flies forward, and we go to black. And we kind of think, is the movie over? That could have been a great spot to end the movie. Like you could have ended it there, and everyone would have been very frustrated, but it would have been like, okay, we don't know what happened. Um, but then we wake up and we see another 28 days later. So now we're meant to assume that we are now 28 days past the initial 28 days. I don't do numbers in my head. So whatever that is, we're basically 2 months later. And Jim wakes up. He's in a bed. This time he's clothed. Well, we think he's clothed. He's got a blanket over him. Um, we see outside, the infected are beginning to die of starvation. They're looking pretty bony. And Jim, Hannah, and Selena all take these sheets, that Selena has been sewing together and knitting, and run outside after Hannah comes in saying that she hears something coming. She hears it coming. And they run outside and place the sheets down on the ground as this plane helicopter type looking thing flies over, and they start to wave, hey. And uh, it's revealed that the sheet says hello. Um, and Hannah smiles at Jim and asks if he thinks it saw them this time. And then we have our credits. And that is 28 days later.
Overall, yes, a lot better than an hour. Hopefully, you guys stuck around for that. But yes, sir, absolutely.
So that was 28 days later. Dan, I think it's time we kind of give final thoughts on this. I'm going to let you go first because I've just done all the talking. Um, what are your thoughts on this movie? What's your overall review? What's your take?
So I know typically I throw some stats out there, and I know this movie was made with about $8 million budget and ended up recouping over $80 million. So a box office success. And when you watch this film, one of the things that makes it different, I think something Matt could probably attest to, is how it's filmed. And this movie was made with digital cameras, which we're not using like the big rigs and things like that. These are literally people with digital cameras that are filming this.
And it
And
shows.
it does. And it works. It gives it a grainy feel. A lot of their effects, there's not a huge amount of CGI in this film, So mostly practical, be a costume, makeup. We do have a few shots in London. Like I think the most beautiful part, one of the most beautiful parts, the most iconic, is when Jim wakes up and
Yeah.
he's in London and it's empty. And apparently, they ended up filming over a period of 3 days, closer in the evening. And this is actually London in like slower times that they're showing you. They didn't cordon off these sections. It's just those sections were empty when they were filming
Wow.
them. There was one moment they ended up having to shut down the highway for the highway sequence when they're going down the road. And apparently, when they did that, they were only able to get about a minute of usable footage. And what's strange is watching this, you would never get that. I don't know if it's a section where they're going down the highway with the windmills in the background, but beautiful shots. Um, and like Matt said, I think one of the best scenes was when they're going through the store, packing up the carts, brings everybody together. It's hopeful, and we see an evolution of characters. I think I really do like the pairing of Jim and Selena, and I know most films feel like they try to push a relationship on you, but I feel like here we see Jim grow strong because he was knocked unconscious for the first 28 days or however long he was out after his accident. He has to adapt to this changing world. And luckily, as Selena points out, and Jim later recants or retells, I wouldn't be alive if it wasn't for you finding me. But he does. He ends up having to kill the infected, the little boy. And in the end, he's like a killing machine to the point where he's almost unrecognizable or indifferential from one of the infected. He's filled with rage. He's infected almost with the same rage that these folks are running around killing each other with, but his is what I guess we could deem as righteous, right? It's not an
Yeah.
infection. Whereas
Yeah, like I was
Selena's,
saying. Oh, go ahead. I didn't mean to s I was just
no,
gonna
go
say,
ahead.
yeah, no, no, I was just gonna reinstate, yeah, that scene where he's killing that soldier and she's got that machete ready to strike, but unsure if she's going to, is hands down my favorite scene of this film, and so much so that there is a that when we made that little infected movie back in 2011, there's a similar scene where, my character's brother is infected, and I have a gun, and I'm watching him attack someone. It's done differently, but it's also done very much the same, where I'm debating whether or not to kill the brother because of what he's doing, and it's just it stuck with me. It's whenever I turn this movie on, it's the scene I look forward to the most, and it doesn't let me down ever. Continues.
And then Selena's growth as a character is kind of in the opposite direction, where she started in that survivor mentality that you couldn't let anyone in. You have to put your walls up. Like, we got to keep moving. And she really knew the way of the world in such a short period of time. Whereas, again, like you had said in your review or the overall recap of the film, she starts to feel that sense of belonging, like she's part of a family unit. And she tells Jim, I had you, Hannah had Frank, and now she doesn't have Frank, and it really breaks up that family unit that they ended up forging. And Frank really was kind of like a father figure, and then we have like daughter, son, daughter almost. Like you just got that vibe from it. And they were looking out for each other, and they're getting further. And not only that, they established some sort of feeling of hope. Like Frank really pushed that on them, and it was heartbreaking to see his death demise. But overall, really love this film. Really love the acting. All the actors involved deserve to have wonderful careers. Some had established it before this, a couple after this, but glad to see regular staples now with Cillian Murphy, especially one of my favorite actors. So are we doing our score now, or am I kicking it back over to you for your review?
Well, you're gonna kick it back over to me, and then we're going to discuss how we're gonna rate this thing.
All right.
Um, but I'll keep it short and sweet. This is a classic, not only in the I know Dan says it's not a zombie movie, but it's a classic in the zombie genre, but it's also a classic in the horror genre as a whole. This wasn't Cillian Murphy's very first film, but it essentially was. He had done some short films and some other things like that. I think he'd only done one other full length thing that he had like a small part in. Um, this is definitely the movie that made him a star. And then you've got John Murphy's score, which is epic. You can't talk about 28 Days Later without talking about the music from 28 Days Later. The theme is perfect. It's even gone on to be used in other films, such as the movie Kick
Yeah,
Ass.
at the moment.
Um, and
Yeah.
yeah, so the theme music is actually in the movie Kick Ass, the Nicolas Cage superhero movie from the 2010s. And Danny Boyle's direction is fantastic. If you're a fan of zombie flicks or just horror in general, and you haven't seen this, first of all, what are you even doing? Second of all, I can't recommend enough. I know right now this is out of print. It is hard to find physically and digitally. I know I had purchased it on the digital streaming site Vudu before it went away. Um, and even now, like the physical copy is hard to get your hands on. But I'd be remiss if we didn't mention that they are bringing back, well, they're making a third movie after years of speculation and rumors. Danny Boyle confirmed that there is a 28 years later in the process. Of course, there is a sequel a couple years after this movie with Jeremy Renner, 28 weeks later, which is equally good in its right. It's not. It's totally different type of movie almost than what we see here. But 28 years later is happening, so one can hope that when that comes out or starts getting closer to being released in the next year or so, um, that we'll see 28 Days Later be re-released on like Blu-ray or 4K or digitally, so more people can get their hands back on this movie because I think it is a great movie. And if you're a fan of the genre, I mean, hey, this is one you're not going to want to miss.
I'm sorry about that. Yep, and I actually think that the new movie, the 28 years later, is going to be released as a trilogy, where
I heard
the
that.
so it's going to be the first one's directed by Danny Boyle, and then the other two will be, I guess, announced later on. I got a lady in the chair giving me information too. What's that? Oh, the lady that did the Marvels is supposedly in talks to be involved with the second
Okay.
film. So,
Okay.
if you can hear.
I didn't. I hear her, but I don't hear what she's saying.
Yeah, so they're going to film back to back to back.
Okay, interesting. And I'm a fan of the first two movies. Have you seen the second movie, Dan? Okay.
Yeah. And I honestly think it's good. I don't
Yeah,
think it's as good as this, but I do
right.
still think it's a good film.
No, I agree. I think it's for a sequel, I think it's very well done. But you're right. It's not quite on the same level as this. Um, so now it's time that we review this sucker. We're 43 minutes in. We're going to start to wrap this up here. But before we do, we've got a couple more things. First being how we're going to rate it. Um, Dan, how do we want to rate this? We do 1 out of 10, and then we try to come up with some sort of kooky thing to make each
I think
episode different. Do we want to do one
Rage Infected Monkeys. Does that work
rage
for it?
infected monkeys, or
Rage
I was going to
Infected
suggest blood dropping
Blood
bird
Droppings.
something. Yeah,
Yeah.
blood infected blood droppings.
All right, we can do that one. That's good.
um, okay, so 1 out of 10. Where are you out of 1 out of 10 infected blood droppings?
For reinventing pretty much like our view, I know you say zombies, but the infected, where we have instead of slow shuffling, moving whatevers. We have parkour, full run, scale zombie infected people. I think that this really takes us beyond what we're used to. I think that's a core for any horror movie lover. And if you haven't watched this, I know Matt said it a couple times, got to get out from under that rock and view this one. So I'm going to go for 9 out of 10 on this one.
Wow, very high. Um, you did this to me last time. I was at a certain number, and then you rated it, and then made me want to change my number. Um, so I was at an 8.5 infected blood droppings, but I think what the heck? I'll go ahead and bump it up to 9. We'll give this a 9 out of 10. Um, this is a great movie. It's a great horror movie. It's a great zombie, not zombie movie. Um, definitely check this out if you can get your hands on it. The only other thing that we are gonna do here before we wrap things up, we did this on The Omen. We're not gonna do this every episode, but we're gonna do it here. We're gonna do something called Shoot the Reboot. Now, uh, as we've mentioned, they've got new movies planned. We got 28 Years Later coming. It has a sequel, but if we had to do this specific movie redone, um, who would we cast and who would these characters be? Dan, do you want to go first? Do you want me to go first?
Yeah, I can knock this out short and sweet for you.
Okay.
Um, I think he could rival Killian in this. I think that Barry Keoghan as
Oh,
Jim would be like strong in this. They're both Irish. That'd be pretty good. I'm gonna recast Selena as Florence Pugh. Again, really solid actress chops. I think she can bring in that firmness, especially as in the Black Widow series when we saw her. I think she's kind of got that combat style going for her. Frank recasting as Idris Elba. I think he could
okay.
pull off that or Idris, sorry, the father figure, strong, grizzled. Hannah, we're gonna go with my namesake of my wife, Kayla Lane, who played Noodle in
Hmm.
Wonka. I think that would be a strong choice. And then also cast Major Henry West as Paul Dano. I think Barry Keoghan and Paul Dano have been together briefly on screen before in the new Batman series, but I feel like he has that weird vibe that he could pretty much pull that off, especially after the Riddler acting.
I mean, I don't even want to tell you mine now. I mean, I want to see your movie. Like that just sounds awesome. Um, I went so basic. I gotta get better with these. I mean, you really put some thought into that. Gosh, I'm embarrassed. Um, so he's not Irish. Uh, I with Jim, I like your choice for Jim better. But I didn't know I did this super quickly after I watched the movie last night. And I was like, okay, who would I pick? Um, you're gonna roll your eyes. I did Timothy Chalamet as Jim. um, for Selena, as mentioned, I adore Naomi Harris, was that her name? Naomi Harris, who's in this. I think she's perfect. I wouldn't want to replace her, but if I had to, I went Kiki Palmer, as Selena, and then Frank, oh gosh, I went John Goodman. I mean, I think John Goodman kinda
Yeah,
lines up
we
more with
I don't hate that. I mean, he's definitely got father acting in his chops as
yeah,
part of his. That's part of his like whole thing, right?
yeah, yeah, I mean, he is one of America's dads. So, and then Hannah, I didn't know who I mean, I love everything about your casting here, but, I went Millie Bobby Brown as Hannah. So that's my reboot versus your reboot. Let us know who has the better reboot. You don't even, I mean, we already know. um, so Dan, that's kind of wraps up 28 days later. It's your turn to pick, sir, as per rotation. What are we going to be watching and talking about next?
So, as many of you may know, we do have Abigail that'll be coming to theaters soon. Hopefully, by next week, Matt and I have both seen Abigail, so we'll be doing a review on that one. That might be on top of our regular rotation. So, Matt will still pick a movie, I'll pick a movie, whatever. But to get in line with that, wanted to go with one of the creative minds behind that, and that would be with the film Ready or Not. So we'll be watching Ready or Not for our next one. I'm not sure 100% where it is available,
I
but I
just I just looked. It doesn't look like it's available anywhere currently. I mean, as far as like streaming wise, it is available to purchase or rent if you are if you're following along with us, Amazon, Vudu, Apple TV. Um, Dan, I'm not sure. I mean, I know I personally own it on the old Vudu, so we can access it there. But yeah, so if you're following along, you know, check out Ready or Not, and we will be Ready or Not. We'll be back, uh, same time, same channel. Any final closing words?
So if you stuck around with us for another episode of Nightmares and Scares, number one, thank you to all the folks that watched our first video. Our second one just released earlier today, so we'll see what that comes in. We'll maybe be able to start doing shout outs for folks that join the channel if we're able to get that going. But please, if you made it this far, like, subscribe, comment if you have a horror movie out there that you'd like us to review. If you would like to tell us that you disagree or agree with our reviews, if you just want to tell us, other odds and ends that maybe you noted with this film or how it affected you, maybe you're a novice filmmaker and it also played into your one of your up and coming things, and maybe even share those with us. If you have a film, if you're, an independent filmmaker, hopefully not holding me at hostage or gunpoint, share that with us. Maybe we can review your film because we definitely like to reach out there to some independent filmmakers as well.
All right. So everyone have a great week, and we will catch you on the next one for Ready or Not. Until then, everybody, we'll see you in your nightmares.
See you guys.